Hello and welcome to the daily newspaper analysis. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 9th of March. So coming to the first article, Friends with Benefits. Now the context here is with regards to Andhra Pradesh, the state of Andhra Pradesh has been demanding the central government for recognizing it as a special category state. So that is something that is the context. Now indeed this issue is something that is important. It is very much in news. So this entire political aspect will not be very important, but definitely the constitutional aspect becomes important for general studies paper 2. So that is also the relevance. Now coming to the background. First and foremost, what you need to know is that what is the special category status? Now, a special category state, this idea was something that came up in the year 1969. It was after the Gadgil Committee report, which proposed that certain states were backward in their development, and as a result of which, these states should be considered as some special category states. And grants to these states, which were in the past made under the Gadgil-Mukherjee formula, under that formula, these states were given some special grants, some block grants were what were given to these particular states. Now, what were these grants? Some example is what is important, but otherwise at present the relevance is not much because this formula is something that has been done away with. But in the past, the formula was that whenever the central government used to give a central assistance, then in that part, directly 30% of the share used to go to these particular states. So that was one provision. Also under the special plan assistance which was given to these states by the Planning Commission, in that special plan assistance, 90% is what was given as a grant and only 10% was what was given as a loan. So these were some provisions which resulted in some upliftment of these particular states. Now, what was the criteria for selecting these special category states? The criteria was basically there were four criteria. The first was a low population. The second criteria was that they should have a strategic location, which means that they should have an international border. Another thing is that there should be an economic backwardness. For example, there should be a non-viability of finances in these states. Another thing that was important was a difficult terrain. So based on these four categories, 11 states were recognized as special category states in India. These included the 7 northeastern states. Then it included the state of Sikkim and the 3 mountainous or hilly states in the country, that is Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand as well as Jammu and Kashmir. So these are the states, these are the 11 states which were the special category states. So this is something that you need to know in the background aspect. Another thing that is very, very important is that the 14th Finance Commission has given its newer recommendation, and as per those recommendations, previously the state was devolving only 32% of the finances to states. Now this devolution has been increased to 42%, and because of this, the relevance of special category status to states is something that has been eroded. The benefits are something that are not very major now. So that is one analysis that is important in the background aspect. Now coming to the issues which are important. The first issue is an issue of commitment. Now here you need to understand that the State Reorganization Act, which was passed in the year 2014 for reorganizing the state of Andhra Pradesh and divided Andhra Pradesh into the state of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, this act in itself does not have any commitment to give a special category status to the state of Andhra Pradesh. Now, definitely the fact is that Andhra Pradesh has suffered because a large amount of its revenue was coming from Hyderabad, which is not under Andhra Pradesh now. So that way, the demand is a general one, a genuine demand. But the commitment was something that was not made under the Act. However, a verbal commitment is what was made by the then Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh. And as a result of which, the present government in Andhra Pradesh is saying that this commitment that was made by the then Prime Minister should be upheld. So that is the issue of commitment here. Another thing that you need to know is that special states are no more special. Now, as I have told you, after the devolution of this increase in devolution from 32% to 42% by the 14th Finance Commission recommendations, the special category states are no more special. They have no special treatment which they are getting. So this demand for a special category status is something that even the finance minister has said that this is something that is not acceptable. It is no more viable. It is not possible because this kind of a criteria at present does not exist only. So that is something that is important here. Another very important issue is with regards to the politicization of this issue. Now, what has happened is that the major ruling party, that is the Telugu Desam Party, is an ally of the NDA government in the center. And this is what has led to the politicization of this issue. The Telugu Desam Party is asking its ally to give it the special category status. Also, elections are due both at the center as well as in Andhra Pradesh next year. 2019 is going to be the election year. So in that context, also this matter has been politicized, and that is why it is gaining much more fuel. So that is something that is important for our analysis here. Another thing which is important is the government's assurance. Now, you need to know that the central government has assured that it is going to give a revenue deficit grant to Andhra Pradesh. That means that in effective, it has agreed to compensating Andhra Pradesh for the revenue losses that it is facing because of a bifurcation as well as losing Hyderabad. But the issue is that the government of Andhra Pradesh is not satisfied by merely a monetary compensation. Rather, this matter has become an emotional one, and that is what is the problem here. They simply want that they should get a special category status. The status is something that should be given to them, irrespective of the fact that this status at present does not hold much of value. So this is something that is political, this is something that is emotional, and that is the entire controversy here. Now, the problem here is that for the government, this is something that is not possible. Firstly, because this is not viable under the 14th Finance Commission recommendations. Also, if the government accepts this, then such kind of political demands can come from other states also. For example, Bihar in the past has been demanding that it should be considered as a special category state. So it can be equivalent to opening a Pandora's box. So that is something that becomes important vis-a-vis this particular controversy. And that is what has been highlighted here. As I've told you, the topic is important for General Studies paper 2. So that's going to be the relevance. Now, coming to the next article, a new norm for the new norm. Now, as obvious, the context is about reviving the non-aligned movement. Now, this is something that is being debated time and again, and we are also seeing that several editorials are what are coming on this. So that makes this issue also important. Now, first and foremost, coming to the background of the non-aligned movement. You all know that in the aftermath of the Second World War, there was a Cold War which began. And two poles is what emerged in the backdrop of this Cold War. That was, one pole was led by the United States of America, and the second pole was what was led by the USSR. And in this backdrop, India at that time came up with this idea of, India was one of the founding members of the NAM, along with other 4 countries. Those countries were Egypt, Indonesia, Yugoslavia and Ghana. These are the 4 other countries. That means in total there were 5 founding members of NAM. And this organization or institution or this body is what came into existence in the year 1955. And at present, this body has approximately 120 members. However, it is said that NAM today is not relevant because the Cold War officially came to an end with the disintegration of the USSR in the year 1989. So that is something that is important from the background aspect. Another thing which you should know here is that there were attempts to revive NAM. There was an idea of a non-aligned movement 2.0. This was something that came up in the year 2012, but again, this movement could not be revived. So that is something that you need to know. Now, coming to the issues which are important. The first issue is with regards to the re-emergence of the Cold War. Now, we are seeing time and again in several editorials it is being discussed that this is an era where a newer form of Cold War is what has emerged. And instead of being a bipolar Cold War of the past, this is a tripolar Cold War where one head is by the US, the second is by Russia, and the third is by China. So this is something that becomes important, that if there is a re-emergence of the Cold War, then shouldn't there be a re-emergence of the NAM also? And more so, this is important for India because the impacts of this Cold War is now being seen more in Asia and also more specifically in South Asia. So that is something that is important. Now, coming to US, one thing that is very obvious about the US foreign policy under President Trump is that it is an ultra-nationalist foreign policy. It is a foreign policy which is very aggressive, and nuclear hegemony is something that US is showing. And in that context, it is being feared that this Cold War is going to get further fueled because the relations between US and Russia as well as US and China are getting impacted, and this is also leading to a nexus between China and Russia. So this is something that is fueling the new or the resurgent Cold War. So that is something that has been analyzed here. Another thing that you need to know with regards regards to Russia is that Russia too is taking a belligerent and a strong stand. For example, we can see the stand that Russia has taken in Syria. Also, on the issue of nuclear weapons, the editorial discusses that President of Russia, Mr. Putin, has been openly declaring or openly claiming the nuclear might of Russia, and this is again going to mean there is a fear that this might further spiral into the past times where there was a military aspect associated with the Cold War. So that is something that can happen in the present times also, given Russia's strong status or such strong statements. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another thing which is important is with regards to the instability in Iran. Now, as we all know, under President Barack Obama, there was an Iran nuclear deal, which was signed. This deal has been declared nullified by the present US regime. Also, Iran has again been given the status of an axis of evil, and this is something that is again impacting the stability in the entire geopolitics of the world or global geopolitics. And this is again something that is being feared to reignite the Cold War. So that is something that has been analyzed. Now, coming to the next issue is with regards to the essence of NAM. Now, here you need to understand that the non-aligned movement had an essence of freedom of thought and a freedom of action which allowed even the smallest of countries to express their opinions. And this essence is something that is important. So, even if today the Cold War has ended, then this essence is something that has value even today, and this can be one ideology which can help in reviving the non-aligned movement. So that is something that has been highlighted here. Another issue is with regards to India. Now, as I've told you, India was one amongst the founding members of the non-aligned movement, and time and again India tried to revive the NAM, or for that matter, India even tried to sustain the non-aligned movement. But today, what has happened is that India has a newer role to play. It has a challenge to rebalance Asia, especially in the backdrop of rising China. India has been compelled to take up a more effective global role and more global influence. So that is something that this editorial is discussing. Another thing is that India is aiming to create a new and alternative universality. The present era is that of a tripolar world, and India is trying that this alignment or this kind of a scenario is something that should be broken. So that is a responsibility which India is taking upon itself. So that is something that has been highlighted here. However, India has some domestic challenges as well. For example, it needs to sustain the economic growth that the country is having. Another thing is that the country needs to focus on social inclusion and democracy, and all of this is something that is vital for India's foreign policy. So until and unless India is going to focus on these domestic challenges, India cannot effectively contribute to the foreign policy of the world. So in that regard, the role that India has to play in reviving NAM is questionable. From one aspect, this role is something that is demanded of India, but on the other aspect, there are several challenges to this. So that is something that is important here. Another issue is with regards to a transactional foreign policy. This will be a key word. Now, all the countries at present we are seeing, they are following a transactional foreign policy, and this is something that is even being criticized against India. India is also following a transactional foreign policy, and that too in the region of South Asia. So this is one criticism, that when the countries are more in a transactional relationship, then how can they come together to form an organization like NAM? So that is one analysis here. Another thing which I have included is particularly this keyword, the dustbin of history. Again, this is a keyword. The idea is that, is it time to finally say goodbye to the non-aligned movement, the idea of NAM, and finally throw it in the dustbin of history, or is there genuinely some scope to revive it? So that is one analysis which has been given. Another thing which is important is with regards to the leadership of the super poor to the superpower. Now, this is what is said in the context of India. At the time when NAM was formed, India was the leader of the super poor. But today, India is a superpower itself. And this is one statement which you can also use in your answers. Indeed, this is a huge achievement by India, and this is something that India should not shy about. And when today India is a superpower, then India can play a much more effective role than what it did in the past. And when at that point of time also India showed the courage to come up with a body like the NAM, then why not today? So that is something that is important here. Another issue is with regards to Quad. Now, as you all know, Quad is a an agreement between 4 countries, that is India, US, Japan and Australia. So when India is already a part of the Quad, then how can you say that India is non-aligned? That is one analysis which has been given, that implicitly India has already formed an alliance with the US, especially to counter the to counter the rise of China in Asia. So definitely India is a part of an alignment, and this non-alignment idea is something that is no more vital for India. So that is the analysis here. Another issue is with regards to India and China. Now, as we all know, the relation between India and China is at its lowest. The Doklam issue is something that is important. Also, China's meddling in South Asia is something that is important. India is one amongst the rare countries which is not a part of the Belt and Road Initiative. So the relation is souring between India and China, and in that context, again, it is being seen that it will become very difficult for India to remain non-aligned. So that is one analysis which has been given. Another very good issue here which has been given, very good idea which you can replicate, is that instead of forming a NAM, instead of forming a non-aligned movement, what is required is a model on the lines of the IBSA. Now IBSA is a body of comprising of 3 countries, that is India, Brazil and South Africa. Now this is primarily a model where like-minded countries have associated with each other. So it is an alliance of like-minded countries, and this is a model which should be followed. What is being analyzed here is that there are so many countries, and each country is at a different stage of development, and so the concerns for each country in the world is different. It is very difficult to bring all the countries on one single platform. For example, we are seeing in the WTO, it is not working. In the UN is not working. This is primarily because all countries have their own aspirations, which these forums which are including all the countries on the same platform, these forums are failing to provide such kind of a benefit to these countries. So what is required is that a functional platform is what should be provided, and this functional platform can be a platform where like-minded countries are forming an alliance. And this is something that even Prime Minister of India had said, that countries should form alliances based on issues of climate change, terrorism, protectionism. So these are the models that will be successful rather than NAM, and this is one idea which you should replicate in your answers. Another thing which has been highlighted here is that, can India form the 4th pole? I told you this is a tripolar world. Can India make itself capable of forming a 4th pole? And this is something that has been analyzed here, that India should focus more on strengthening its own self and forming the 4th pole, or for that matter leading a 4th pole, rather than forming a non-aligned movement. So that is something that has been highlighted. Indeed, this issue of NAM is important. SAARC, NAM, these are some institutions that are gaining importance now. So both of them will be important for this year mains. So that is the relevance. Now coming to the next article, chance for peace. Now the article is context with regards to North Korea's offer to talk to both South Korea as well as US. Now the political aspects are not important, so what I shall be limiting the discussion to the issues which are relevant for us. The first issue is that this is a victory of soft power. You should know that this achievement, this offer for talks, has happened in the aftermath of the Winter Olympics which were being held in South Korea. So this is a reflection of how soft power continues to hold relevance. So that is one area where you can use this example. So that is the relevance here. Another thing is with regards to denuclearization of North Korea. Now at present there is a confusion whether or not North Korea has offered to denuclearize. So there is an issue that is important here, that whether or not denuclearization of the Korean peninsula will happen. So that is one important issue, because denuclearization is the precondition which US has set for the normalization of ties with North Korea. So that is the analysis here. Another thing that is important is with regards to the role of US. Now what has been said in the context of US is that US has adopted a hard policy. It has a muscular foreign policy. We are seeing both in the case of Iran as well as in the case of North Korea, President Trump has not been very much willing to hold negotiations with both these countries. So in that context, it will be important, it will be vital to see what will be the role of US in maintaining peace and stability in the Korean peninsula. So that is an important analysis here. Another issue is with regards to an open diplomatic channel. Now you need to understand this is something that is going to be vital for India-Pakistan relation also. Now what has happened in the context of India-Pakistan is that the diplomatic channels are somehow being closed. However, here you need to understand that despite the tensions between South Korea and North Korea, the diplomatic channels being open have led to finally a solution and resolution of this issue. So this is something that becomes important lesson for India and Pakistan, which should be adopted, that diplomatic channels should be continuously left open. What is often seen is that even a small amount of a political disturbance between these two countries manifests a breaking of this soft power between the two countries. Recently also we had discussed an article where we discussed that despite a common culture, there is minimal engagement between the two countries. So that is something that reflects that how India and Pakistan have a long way to go in building soft power, which can eventually resolve this issue permanently. So that is one importance for us here. Another thing is with regards to the opportunity and challenges. Now, this scenario is both an opportunity. If it is grabbed, then it is an opportunity, and there is definitely a challenge to ensure that normalization of ties take place and there is effective denuclearization of North Korea. So that is something that is important here. Indeed, this issue of North Korea and Korean Peninsula is important vis-a-vis the foreign relation or international relations. So that is the relevance. Now, based on today's discussion, please try and attempt these questions within a word limit of 150 words. And with this, we finish today's discussion. I thank you all for watching and I hope to see you tomorrow.